Hello, everybody, and welcome to Quincy Carrier Live. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, make sure you hit that like button if you want to share this stream with somebody else so they can see and get in here and get into conversation with us. Make sure you do just that. We got a lot to talk about today after what was, at the very least, we could describe as an interesting game. Worst case scenario, you call it probably one of the most disappointing games you ever seen, on top of probably the most disappointing 4-game stretch that you've ever watched a Browns team go about. Look, there's a lot of emotion to throw around. And when there's that much emotion to throw around, we're going to see a lot of suggestions from people, right? Because people are mad and they want a solution. And we're quite frankly scrambling to find a solution, to find somebody to blame that's the problem so we can get rid of that person and move on. But the issues that are going on with the Cleveland Browns, they don't just mount up to one person, especially this week. Was a multitude of things that have gone wrong. But I don't know about you guys, but I have been wondering for the longest time, what in the world is different about this year's Browns team? Why does this year's Browns team feel so different than last year's team? Why does it feel different when I watch them? Why does my trust of them feel different? And you can say the obvious answer, they're not as good as they were last year, but it's the same team. Like what aren't they doing? Where aren't they executing? And then it hit me. This Browns team, unfortunately, has demonstrated a complete and utter allergy to winning football games. Last year, the Browns and winning football games, it felt magnetic. It felt like you could put the possibility to win all up in that corner, but you put that magnet there, Browns going to find a way to win. We found a way to win with a bunch of different quarterbacks. We found a way to win in a bunch of different types of games last year. We found ways to win on defense. We found ways to win on offense. We found ways to win with special teams against good teams last year. The Browns found ways to win. And I think that's the biggest difference, right? If the Browns ended these games just a little bit different, I think we would feel a whole lot different about this team. But the way that these games have ended has been significantly disappointing and has demonstrated that this team has an allergy to win. Let me go through the examples, because in all 4 games, I would argue, especially on the offensive side of the ball, the Browns, for whatever reason, whoever you want to blame, I think there's multiple people to blame to go around for every week that it happened, could not put games away or get back into the game. The Dallas game is a good example, right? The game goes to 27-3 after a punt return touchdown by Kevontae Turpin. But then right after that, the Browns get the ball and they score a touchdown, and all of a sudden it's back to 17 points. Then the defense starts getting 3 and outs after 3 and out after 3 and out. In 2 drives, the Browns defense allowed just 7 yards after the Browns scored their first touchdown of the game against Dallas. Unfortunately, on the adjacent drives for the Cleveland Browns offense, they managed to just go 2 yards on 6 plays in 2 drives, completely blowing any far-reaching chance that they had of coming back in that game. There was a chance where the Browns could at least make it competitive, right? It's at the beginning of the 3rd quarter. You still only down 17 points. You score again. Now it's only 10 points. Now it gets real. You get the ball back. You score again. Now you're only down 3. It wasn't probable that they'd come back in Dallas. But the one chance they had to make that game competitive, they did not take it. They did not seize on the opportunity. See, last year's team in that kind of situation, they would have at least made it interesting. We've seen the Browns dig themselves in the holes last year, and they were able to dig themselves out of it. Let's go to the Jacksonville game, the one game the Cleveland Browns have won so far this season. The Browns were up 16-3 late in the 3rd quarter, but could not score an offensive point after what they scored, I think, 5 minutes into the 3rd quarter. Well, not 5 minutes, 2 minutes into the 3rd quarter. For the last 25 minutes of the game, the Cleveland Browns did not score a single offensive point. That allowed Jacksonville to get back in this game. That allowed it to get to the points where Jacksonville had the ball only down 3. And it took an amazing punt by Corey Bojorquez and a safety by Alex Wright in order to close that game out. Again, special teams and defense closed that game out. But offensively, we couldn't finish that game. Some of you might say, hey, last year you might have had, you had Joe Flacco, you had healthier offensive line, but that's not true. I've seen the Browns put a closing drive together offensively last year with P.J. Walker. Nobody's going to make an argument that P.J. Walker is better than Deshaun Watson. Nobody's going to make an argument that DTR is better than Deshaun Watson. Nobody's going to make an argument that, well, some people make an argument that Joe Flacco was better than Deshaun Watson, but that's up for debate, right? Either way, you had that opportunity there. And to be fair to Deshaun Watson, last year in that situation against Tennessee and Arizona, Deshaun closed that game out. Scored a touchdown in the third quarter. Have fun. Let DTR hand the ball off to Jerome Ford a ton of times. End the game. Boom, we're happy. We're celebrating. We're doing Victory Monday stuff. Browns celebrating, boots to asses, all that fun stuff that we like to do. But against Jacksonville, it got tight for no reason, right? You want the offense to be able to put points up, at least 19, maybe even a touchdown, to just end the game there against an opponent that is proven to be bad in Jacksonville. They're still winless on the season. Let's fast forward to the New York game, third game of the season. Browns bring this game back within 1 score. Offense gets the ball 3 times, down 1 score. They can't get it done. 1, because Jerome Ford fumbles a handoff. The other 2, they go out on downs. 3 golden opportunities to come back into this game. 3 chances to seize for this Cleveland Browns team to get back into a game. All 3 chances wasted. Not just because one person played bad, right? It wasn't Deshaun's fault, in my opinion, that Jerome Ford fumbled that football. And, the other 2, like, it's debatable what was Deshaun's fault. We done went through this and argued all this stuff before. But everybody had a chance in the offense to make it so that the Browns would seize on that opportunity. And it didn't happen. Let's go to this game against Las Vegas. Same situation. Browns get a fumble return touchdown from the defense that brings this game back to 1 score. Now, unfortunately, you missed the extra point. But the Cleveland Browns had 3 great chances to come back and win that game on Sunday. You had a touchdown throw to Amari Cooper that got nullified because of a ticky-tack holding call by Nick Harris. It's unfortunate. Had a 3-and-out on the next drive. And then on the last drive of the game for the Browns offense, you move up and down the field. Jerome Ford breaks off a big run. You get the ball to the 15-yard line. You have the momentum. And I'm thinking, oh, the Browns about to win this. We about to get a game-winning touchdown. The vibes are about to change. It's about to be immaculate. Bad snap on first down. Wastes the down, but more importantly, puts the Browns in 2nd and 16. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad. I believe the Browns had to call a timeout after that, too, because the ball was still in play. The clock was still going. I think they might have ran a play after that, but they called a timeout somewhere in between there. Now, it was 40 seconds left. Didn't really matter, but lose a timeout, lose 5 yards and a down because your center decides to snap the ball early. By the way, if you look at the film, Nick Harris, Deshaun Watson, they could not get it together with the snap all game. And I have faith that that was more about Nick Harris than it was about Deshaun, because it didn't happen when Ethan Posick was out there. So something was going on with Nick Harris in the snap count. That ends up dropping you back 5 yards, losing it down, and it completely changes how you approach that drive. When the Browns got that field position on first down, 1st and 10 on the 15-yard line, it was real simple. Let's run this ball with Deontay Foreman. Let's get about 4 yards here. Bring this to a 2nd and 6. Maybe we'll throw the ball with Deshaun Watson here. If Deshaun sees a lane, he can run, maybe get a first down, maybe get a first down throwing the ball, maybe get a first down running the ball. Probably end up in 3rd and short. Convert that 3rd and short. If you don't convert it, no problem. You got a 4th and short. Instead of that happening and the Browns being able to score relatively similar to how they scored at the beginning of the game, which it looked like they were about to do, you get a second 16, and now you're working from behind the sticks, and you got a whole different set of play calls that you have to call. There was another opportunity in that game, not going to be talked about enough, but if you go watch my film breakdown on my channel, Quincy Carrier, youtube.com/Quincy Carrier, you'll see that Jordan Atkins was open on the out. Deshaun throws it. Unfortunately, defensive end gets his hands up, blocks it. Can't really blame that on anybody offensively. Defense just makes a play. Deshaun makes a good throw. You get it to 4th and 2. And then the play gets blown up. There are a couple opportunities you could have thrown, but it would have been a 50-50 ball at best. And then you look back and you think to yourself, damn, why couldn't we just get the snap right on 2nd and 6? Well, not 2nd and 16, on 1st and 10. Feel like we win that game if that snap doesn't go that way. We could blame it on the extra point. We could blame it on a holding call. There's a number of things we could blame it on. But the truth is, through 4 games, this offense has refused to close games or win games in critical moments. And I'm not blaming that on any one individual. I'm just pointing out that that is a trend. It's something that the entire offense needs to be accountable to. Not just one person, but the entire offense. This is as a unit, right? That they need to be accountable for this, because this is ridiculous. Last year's Browns team, despite, I would argue, being less talented offensively, right? Like, you have Jerry Jeudy here. Maybe Amari Cooper has dipped a little bit, but you still have Amari Cooper. Like, you get David Njoku back. You have talent on this offense, and you can't finish these games. You can't put games away. This team last year had a killer instinct. They knew when it was time to put teams away. They knew when it was time to stop playing around. They had a switch. This team does not have that. Offensively, somewhat defensively, they have it, but they don't have that switch there. Amari Cooper, we talked about it, playing some of the most disappointing football we've seen. Now, could he bounce back? I don't think it would be crazy if Amari Cooper bounced back and had a good season after this. To be fair to Amari again, he's had bad games like this. This is just the first time that all of those bad games have piled up at the beginning of the season. But he had 6 games with a drop rate of 50% or lower last year. This is not abnormal for Amari Cooper over the course of a season, but it is abnormal for Amari Cooper to have in the first 4 games of a season. So maybe he turns it around. But last year, with no matter who was out there at quarterback, no matter who was out there at wide receiver, no matter who was out there at tackle, no matter who was out there, period, this Cleveland Browns team knew how to win. They knew how to seize on opportunities for the most part. They knew how to play themselves back in position to win. And this year, even with their starting unit, I see a team that has to learn that all over again. I think that's the most frustrating thing about watching this Browns team, is that this is a Browns team that just for whatever reason has forgotten to win. And we saw this team be able to cling on to the most narrow pathways to victory last year. We saw this team beat the 49ers with a practice squad quarterback and barely hang on to beat them. Like, do you think that this team has it in them right now to do what that team did, despite it being the same exact people on this team? Like, it's capable. This team is capable of it, right? When Browns teams of the past did stuff like this, it would suck. But you know what? At the end of the day, it just might be who they are. But what's frustrating about watching the Cleveland Browns right now is we know wholeheartedly, without a shadow of a doubt, that this team is capable of it. We literally watched them do it. We watched them do it last year. We watched them win those games. We watched them, no matter who the quarterback was, rally to victory. With Deshaun Watson, they came back from 17 on the road against the best team in football that year, the Baltimore Ravens, who ended up being the 1 seed after they were on a hot streak. We saw them do that last year. And yeah, they have injuries. Yeah, they have stuff that they're adjusting to. But that core element of who that team was last year, that should be there because it's the same core group of people. At the end of last season, I remember Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry looking at themselves and talking to themselves at the press conference and saying to themselves, hey, I think we got ourselves a championship locker room. Why did they say that? The reason they said that is because they saw a locker room that was able to win games in those kind of situations. No matter how much they were counted out, they were able to rally together and win. That's why they thought they had a championship caliber locker room. That's why they went to the extents to bring everybody back. But this year, this don't feel like a championship caliber locker room for whatever reason. I don't know what's going on with this team. I don't know what's specifically different from this year and last year when it comes to the locker room dynamic. Maybe it's the new offense. Maybe it's a couple of new pieces in there. But it can't just be Watson. We saw them with Watson be able to do this. It can't just be one different thing. There has to be something. Like I'm watching some people say it's Brian Callahan or Bill Callahan is the reason this can't happen, right? That seems to be the most common suggestion, right, Ian, is it's Bill Callahan not being here. That's why this Browns team looks different. Well, if that were the case, you would think that there would be some kind of tangible difference in the place that he went. He went to Tennessee. Spoiler warning. Tennessee stinks just like we stink. I don't think it's Bill Callahan. I don't think it's that simple. What is it, Stump Mitchell? We're going to say it's Stump Mitchell not being here? It's not Bill Callahan. It's not Stump Mitchell. It's not Alex Van Pelt. None of those guys are successful where they are right now. The New England Patriots offense is not successful. Bill Callahan is not having a successful run right now with the Tennessee Titans. They're talking about firing his son 4 weeks into the season. Stump Mitchell, I don't even know if he coaches anywhere. The reviews I've heard for people who've played with Stump Mitchell at other places, not really great on him. I don't think it's Stump. I don't think it's Callahan. Like, I don't think it's any of these things that we can just point to and be like, oh, clean, easy. We lost our offensive line coach. It's not that. It's not that. It's not even close to that. It's something else. There's something bigger in the dynamic of this locker room. It's not as simple as I feel like some want it to be by just pinning it on Bill Callahan not being here. That's what's frustrating about it. The Browns have problems. These aren't problems we could just diagnose and figure out. These aren't problems with clean solutions. Some people are complaining about DeJuan Jones. All this stuff that DeJuan Jones did that drives you crazy right now, DeJuan Jones did that last year. Not being able to handle stunts and twists, he did that last year. You just notice it more because you can blame it on Bill Callahan. The Browns' offensive line, I mean, they were injured. They weren't great last year. This week, they were better than they've been the last few weeks. They gave Deshaun Watson 63% clean pockets, which previously it's been about 55%. So much better job this week. And I think you got a better performance out the quarterback because of that. But where's that ability to find ways to win? Where's that killer instinct that this team had last year? They don't got it. They don't got it on defense. They don't got it on offense, especially. Where is it? Let's speak of the defense real quick. This defense, I don't know what happens to it for halves of games. You've noticed that? You've noticed that with the defense? The defense plays one half of football every week, but in the 4 weeks they played 2 games. Like it feels like of complete football. First half versus Dallas, not where you want them to be. Second half, where you want them to be. First half versus Jacksonville, where you want them to be. Second half versus Jacksonville, a little bit leaky. First half versus New York, absolutely not where you want them to be. Second half versus New York, awesome, great job. First half versus Las Vegas, not where you want them to be. Second half versus Las Vegas, at least they were better and they showed up more consistently because they had the decency to not show up for both quarters this time, or both halves this time. Look, man, we're letting some mediocre quarterbacks carve up this defense. We're letting some pretty unworthy opponents do this to us. Daniel Jones is not good. He carved you up. Gardner Minshew is not good. Almost got benched last week. He didn't carve you up, but he gave you way more problems than Gardner Minshew should. Like, we don't feel like the defense is an advantage anymore because we should have been excited going in to play Gardner Minshew with this defense. Oh, we're going to destroy him. We're going to get like 2 interceptions. We should have been rolling, confident. We don't feel like that anymore. We were worried about Gardner Minshew. And we're shaking in our boots right now, at least some of us are, about Jaden Daniels, a rookie quarterback. Think about that. If I would have told you at the beginning of the season, the Browns play a rookie quarterback in the first quarter of the season, and you're worried about it, you would have told me that I was all kind of delusional. But that's legitimately where we're at. We are quivering our boots online about Jaden Daniels because of the performance level of this defense. This defense, their issues, I think, again, pretty simple here for the defense. I have no idea why the defense does this. And shout out to Pete Smith. I've heard him call it the flying fish defense. This defense is allergic to just making a solid tackle. Every time you see a Browns defender, whether they make a tackle or not, they are launching off both feet and throwing their shoulder at the ball carrier. Why are they doing this? Like, I get it every once in a while. If the opportunity were there, one of your boys got him held up and you want to force a big play, so you want to hit him as hard as possible, so you do that. That makes sense there. But why is that our default tackle for this team? Every time, no matter what, we're diving at the ball carrier. We're trying to come across field, dive at the ball carrier. Whether we're squared up or not, that's how we decide to tackle. Sometimes it's because we're coming across field and that's the only angle that you can get. Sometimes it's just because that's what you want it to do. They're doing it so frequently that I can't just chalk this up to players making bad decisions. I have to chalk this up to that must be a coaching point from the coaching staff that the Browns and their players should launch at every tackle. Like that feels like it's being coached. There's no reason it's happening this much. It didn't happen this much last year. Sure, they made big tackles. Sure, they made big hits. Of course they did. They were a great defense last year. But they weren't diving like this. And it's just leading to all kinds of missed tackles. These missed tackles are leading to big plays. I mean, that play right there, third quarter, 5 minutes, 27 seconds left. Oh, man, I'm getting PTSD just thinking about it. Because what happens there is that the Browns miss 2 tackles at the line of scrimmage. And I believe they gave up a touchdown. I don't understand why the defense suddenly feels like they're coached poorly when I thought they were coached well last year. And they've changed literally nothing. That makes no sense to me. Like, the things that I have issues with are mainly on coaching. Jim Schwartz, is still the coach. What is going on? And this isn't just as simple as Jim Schwartz got figured out, right? Because I know some people are going to say that. Maybe just Jim Schwartz got figured out. Jim Schwartz has been figured out. Like, it's not about figuring out Jim Schwartz. That's not the issue with Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz has never run a super complex scheme. Jim Schwartz was never going to disguise you to death. The Browns knew that when they brought him in. That's what he did last year. You didn't catch the NFL by surprise by running a Jim Schwartz defense last year. That wasn't why you were successful. They knew what you were going to do. We were just much better at executing it last year. But for whatever reason this year, the execution is poor, and it's poor in ways that I have to look at Jim Schwartz and ask the question, like, bro, what are you telling them to do? Like, why are they doing this all the time? Why do the Browns feel like this is an appropriate way to go about tackling somebody? It's mind-boggling that this is the case with the defense. There's no doubt in my mind they're going to play better football than this, but like the fact that this happened the last couple of weeks especially, I mean, what the Browns have had 8 missed tackles this week. They had 6 last week. We're talking about 14 missed tackles, forced missed tackles in 2 weeks. We're talking about one of the lowest graded tackle teams in all of football, according to PFF. I think we're second or third next to like Jacksonville. And look, I understand that the tackling was never going to be top of the league great because we play a lot of man. We take a lot of chances. But what in the world is going on? Look at some of these stats. Go ahead, pull that up for me. First, 1.5 second quarter points per game. That's 32nd in the league. Is this the offense? 32 penalties. So this is the offense. We know the offense hasn't played well. But it's confusing how bad the defense has been because they have no business to be this bad. At least when I look at the offense, I can say to myself, well, the offensive line's beat up. Nick Chubb's not in there. You know, like it makes sense that the Browns offense isn't great right now. But this defense, it makes no sense. Look at this Browns rushing defense numbers. 107 carries, 493 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4.6 yards per carry. And again, the league low tackling grade there for the Cleveland Browns. It's an awful tackling grade for the Browns. I think a couple of things are happening defensively. The truth about a Jim Schwartz system is that Jim Schwartz's defense is only going to be as good as the defensive line is. And last year, they had excellent play from Myles Garrett. They had good play from Zadarius Smith, and they had some solid play from these interior defensive linemen. I think Myles Garrett is playing well, but Myles is also limited with this foot. So Myles is playing less. On top of Myles Garrett playing less, we got to have a frank and earnest conversation about every other edge on this roster when it comes to run defense. They stink. Teams just run straight at Zadarius Smith. It's not difficult. Teams just run straight at Obo Okoronkwo. It's not difficult. Teams just run straight at Alex Wright. We know Alex Wright got bad run defense tendencies from what we saw in 2022. Your interior, I think, is worse at stopping the run than last year. Quentin Jefferson makes Maurice Hurst look like a run-stop god. And Maurice Hurst is not good at stopping the run. But Quentin Jefferson just that damn bad at it. I think he's one of the worst graded defensive tackles against the run. And it looks like it when you watch him on tape. He's bad. Really bad at stopping the run. Teams just run at him. You look at the Browns spray patterns for running backs. Teams just run right at Zadarius Smith, and they run right at Quentin Jefferson. Those are the two most profitable places to run against the Cleveland Browns. Ain't even the jet sweep stuff anymore. Nah, they're just running straight at Zadarius Smith, and they're just running straight at Quentin Jefferson. Every other edge hasn't been better. Like the fact that we can't contain an edge, the fact that we keep getting beat around the corner is kind of ridiculous that it keeps happening because it didn't happen last year. They got to figure something out. They're missing tackles. They're not setting edges. Look, for like 3/4 of this game last week, the Browns looked awful defensively. In the fourth quarter, they looked good. Once Ronnie McLeod picked up that fumble, scored that touchdown, and they realized the Browns had a real chance to win this game, all of a sudden the defense looked different. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in that locker room. I don't know what's going on in that building in Berea. But something's not passing the sniff test. This does not look like a team that believes they can win in the same way that they believed they can win last year. I don't know why that is. But it's obvious to me when I see how lackluster the defense comes out at times that this is a team that does not believe in each other. Because last year, they would struggle, but they would pick each other up. Remember Martin Emerson giving DTR a big bear hug? After DTR got that drive in the defense, they fought, scraped the whole damn game to keep that game alive, just so DTR can get that one drive at the end of the game to win it. They were willing to withstand all of that to win a game, and they stayed together. What I fear is that the offense and the defense, they're not together right now. You know what's one thing that stuck out to me, my bad? When we were talking about the team getting booed. And it was interesting who was saying stuff about that. Who was saying it was okay. Because, see, the team got booed not because the defense was bad, but the team was getting booed because the offense was underperforming. It's been interesting because we've heard some of these guys on this defense complain about that when it was them getting booed in 2022. Offense gets booed. Same defensive guys are saying, hey, we understand. Now, maybe it's them learning from the 2022 debacle to not fight the fans on this. That could be growth. Or maybe it's a sign that these two units just ain't together right now. That the defense kind of has animosity towards the Browns offense because of their lack of performance, or that the defense just doesn't believe that their offense can do what they need to do to win. If I just take what I've seen the first 4 weeks of the season, I find that is a conclusion to come to that's hard to rule out. Because it just explains too much. Why does this defense look so lackluster at times? Why does this defense only really start to show up when they're down one score in the fourth quarter? Like every other moment, the defense ain't showing up. But like when the Browns get a little bit of momentum finally, they get a score on offense, now the defense wakes up. Like it's almost like the defense is like, I'll wait for the offense to do anything. Why does it feel that way? It's weird. They got to get together. I really hope that this ugly, disgusting, embarrassing effort that the defense had was their wake-up call to get their nose out of the behind. Maybe they were too deep into their own hype about how they're the best defense in the world. And maybe they felt like, yeah, we're being held back by the offense. And it might have been true, but you're not going to win games thinking like that. You know, being antagonistic towards your own offense. You're not going to win games like that. This should be a wake-up call that they should probably be ready to support their offense no matter what. Because I don't care how bad Deshaun's playing. What this defense did this week is unacceptable. And the fact of the matter is, because they played so bad, they actually wasted one of the best games Deshaun Watson has ever had in the Cleveland Browns uniform, if not the best game the Browns he's had in the Cleveland Browns uniform. You wasted it. You absolutely wasted it. Why? Because Gardner Minshew was on the other side, or because you weren't locked in defensively? because you thought, oh, this is going to be one of them games where the offense can't score. You know, we got to do it all. So now you're taking chances and diving at feet every time you got to make a tackle. You notice that stuff started to stop once the score got between 4 points. What are y'all doing? Just play what's in front of you if you're the Browns defense. It seems like they're trying to tackle something bigger than the player in front of them every play. It makes no sense to me. Why are you doing that? Why are you trying to hit stick every single offensive player? Why are you trying to force a fumble every single play? Why are you trying to score points every single attempt? It makes no sense to me. The mindset behind this defense right now. That more than anything's got me confused because look, offensively, I'm frustrated. I'm mad. You know, I was pretty disappointed with the quarterback play in the first 3 weeks, but offensively, it makes sense they're struggling at least, and they should get better because they're going to get healthier. Jack Conklin's going to come back one day. Jed Wills is going to come back one day. You're going to get healthier on the offensive line. You're going to get David Njoku back. You're going to get Nick Chubb back. You're going to get these pieces that the offense desperately needs, and you're probably going to play better offensive football. But no reinforcements are coming for the defense. We're talking about Maurice Hurst and Michael Hall. That's not going to save the run defense. Like, it's not like the Browns got like a big star player not playing right now. Like, you still got Myles Garrett out there. He's playing limited snaps, but you still should be better around Myles Garrett than you are right now. I was ready to come in here and blame the run game. Y'all know how I feel about Devin Bush. Well, the linebackers, my bad. Blame the linebackers. Y'all know how I feel about Devin Bush. Devin Bush wasn't the problem. The linebackers, as injured and mangled as they weren't the problems. The defensive line is the issue. You got no run stuffers on the defensive line. And if Myles is going to have to take less and less time on the field to recover that foot properly, or forbid miss a game, we have absolutely no answers. We're going to be the worst run defense team in the NFL that week if Myles doesn't play. Because it's really, it starts on the line of scrimmage with this run defense. That's what the issues are. It's not JOK. It's not Devin Bush. I thought it might be when I was watching the game live. Turns out when I looked at the tape, it's the defense. The defensive line. They're not playing good. Zadarius Smith gets ran at. They're picking on him. Hasn't really been a factor as a pass rusher. Hasn't really been effective as a run defender. The only other defensive lineman to give him credit that's playing well is Dalvin Tomlinson. Dalvin Tomlinson is playing good football right now. Myles Garrett is playing good football right now. Everybody else, like Shelby Harris is all right, but Quentin Jefferson and every other edge, man, they're not just liabilities on the defensive line. They're active attack points for teams to run at. It's that bad. It's really that bad. And again, man, Jim Schwartz's defenses were never complex. He's been in the league for a long time. He's never been known for his complexity. They've been successful, but they've never been complex. So this idea that Jim Schwartz needs to add all these different wrinkles to his defense, sure. But that's not how Jim Schwartz has ever been successful. He's never outthought you. He's just outmaneuvered you. And how does he outmaneuver you? By having a better defensive line than you can block. Well, if that defensive line's not playing great, this whole Jim Schwartz defense falls apart. His defenses are only as good as the defensive line is. That's exactly what we wanted, by the way, when we hired Jim Schwartz. Remember that. We actively wanted somebody who was going to put the onus on the Browns' defensive line because we felt like that was a strength. We wanted somebody who was going to build and develop the Browns' defensive line. That's Jim Schwartz. We wanted somebody who was going to put that pressure of the Browns' defense on the defensive line. And right now, the Browns' defense is only as good as the defensive line is. You could draw a direct line from when this defense started to be, a little disappointing, but still able to handle business. And then when things started opening up, and that line directly correlates with Myles Garrett's snap count. He's not on the field as much. That means one less person the other team has to worry about, and a defensive lineman on the field that they feel comfortable running at. They just get run happy every time Myles Garrett get off that game. They don't even try to throw the ball. They just run both sides, throw an end around in there because they know without Myles, they got nobody setting no edge. Unless Myles Garrett's foot is going to get healthy today, and he's going to be able to get back to his full snap count, somebody's got to step up on the defensive line. Ogbo Okoronkwo, huge disappointment this year. Really loved what he was able to contribute last year. Non-existent this year. Like, have you remembered Ogbo Okoronkwo plays for this team? He was a contributor. He ain't done nothing this year. I mean, like Zadarius Smith, I got to remember he played here. It's frustrating to watch this team. It's frustrating to watch these edges. It's really that simple, though. Jim Schwartz's defense, really only as good as their defensive line. So if you want this team to be better defensively, you need this defensive line to figure it out outside of Myles Garrett. Really do need them to figure it out. Like, that's why Myles Garrett playing through all these injuries. He knows if he's not out there, like, it's going to be a disaster. Got to figure it out. Got to have these guys step up, man. Let's talk about what the offense needs to get better. One, I think I mentioned it before. Offense needs to just get healthy. I think health is a big issue for this Cleveland Browns offense. Like, I thought quarterback play was really encouraging this week. I've been as critical as Deshaun Watson as anybody over the last few weeks. This was encouraging what we saw, because it wasn't just that he played well and he made a couple of throws. No, he was processing. You could see him get to his first, second, third read at times. You could see him work through progressions. You could see him pre-snap, see a blitz come and throw right over it. Now, this was a very encouraging week for Deshaun Watson. Now, the question is this going to be who he is every week? Or is this just going to be who we see for 1 week? Because that's the concern with Deshaun. Like, is he not consistent right now? Or is this just, hey, early season woes, he had a bad start to the year, he's going to fix it together? Because I think the Jacksonville game was just him executing what was there and taking what was there. And it wasn't necessarily like a great game. It was just a better game than the Dallas game. This week's game was a legitimate great game, and I think no matter where you put it in Deshaun Watson's career, it would land as a great game. He made plays. He created point opportunities. I think he was actually really good in this game. Things still need to get better around that position. Like wide receiver, Amari Cooper, I don't know, but you got to figure it out. We talked about it earlier. Offensive line needs to get healthier. Let's talk about DeJuan Jones, man. I want to be charitable to DeJuan because I feel like a lot of people are jumping on him right now. And I get why a lot of people are jumping on DeJuan Jones. Because DeJuan Jones is not playing great. And DeJuan Jones is giant. And he looks more giant than he was last year. And it makes people ask, did he do what he needs to do? Is he out of shape? All of this, but I think we're really overthinking it. DeJuan Jones, to me, doesn't look like an out-of-shape tackle. Like, he's still able to get to his drops. I know people think he's like 430 pounds right now. I don't think that's the case. I think it would, if he was 430 pounds, we would have noticed it before week 1. I'll just put it that way. Like, the team would be actively trying to publicly shame him into losing weight if that were the case. I don't think that's the case. I think we're just projecting at this point. But what DeJuan Jones does look like is a young player who's overwhelmed. Like, we did all of this. We got so excited about DeJuan Jones because of how good he played so early in his career. I legitimately think a lot of us forgot that he was still a developmental player. And he still has a lot of development to go. DeJuan Jones coming into the league was a super raw prospect. And he still has a lot of room to grow. And he still has a lot of development to go. And that was the rap on him coming out of Ohio State. It's part of the reason he dropped. The other part was the whole basketball thing. But that's part of the reason DeJuan dropped. So he had a lot of development to go. He's a super raw prospect. This is why I was never for him flipping sides, because I just want DeJuan to be developed on the right side first. Then we can worry about if he can flip. And he looks like he's overwhelmed right now. Part of that overwhelmness is the fact that he has a rookie next to him now instead of a veteran in Wyatt Teller. And that means the pressure is on him. That means the adjustments are on him. He is now responsible for his rookie on his inside shoulder. It looks like it's taking its toll. He's overwhelmed. I think that's really the case with DeJuan. He, more than anybody, needs his offensive line to get healthy. Because Wyatt Teller getting back would be huge for DeJuan Jones. It would be absolutely massive for DeJuan Jones. And not just Wyatt Teller, like even Jack Conklin getting back, I think would be a big deal for DeJuan, because then he could rotate in and out and you could have that load lessen by having Jack Conklin in there. But I just see a young player who's overwhelmed right now. He can't make a decision. He's getting fooled on stunts and twists. It's a tough spot. And I talked about this in my pregame show earlier last week. When you have that much inexperience on one side of the offensive line, they're going to stunt twist you to death. And that's what the Raiders did. And it's going to work because these dudes are just young. Like between Zach Zinter and DeJuan Jones, you maybe have like 15 games of experience combined. Yeah, you're going to get beat like that, even if those guys are supremely talented. David Njoku and Nick Chubb coming back, I think that's going to be a huge boost for this team. One, David Njoku, really good pass protector, really good chip blocker, really good run blocker, going to take some of the pressure off of the offensive line. And David Njoku makes decision-making for the quarterback a lot easier, right? I think Deshaun Watson's at his best when he's decisive. I think Deshaun Watson's at his most decisive when he trusts his wide receivers. And I think he trusts David Njoku, and he trusts Jerry Jeudy. And I think he used to trust Amari Cooper. I am worried that the amount of struggles that Amari Cooper has had this season is going to create a situation where Deshaun just doesn't trust him anymore, because it's getting close to that. But again, I think those two players, David Njoku and Nick Chubb, they really simplify the decision-making for the offense. And I think the more simple the decision-making is for the quarterback position, the better the play will be out of it. That's really the story of this week's Cleveland Browns. We'll see how Deshaun plays from week to week. If Deshaun plays at this level for the rest of the season, you got a chance, because I do think the defense is going to play better later in the year. I think the offense is going to be much better when they get healthy. And if you have a quarterback playing at this level, you can make a run. The season is not close to over if that's the case. But one, we got to see if that's the Deshaun, or that's going to be closer to the Deshaun that we see for the rest of the year. And like, I would be encouraged that that could be the case, because I saw stuff in here that he had not done in Jacksonville or any game before this. Like, that was the most complete Deshaun has looked in a Cleveland Browns uniform from a film standpoint. A lot of other games, he made some excellent throws, made a couple of great decisions. It was consistent. The processing, the seeing things, the pre-snap reads, all of that stuff was consistently good the entire game. Now, he's going to play against better defenses after he plays Washington. He should have a good game against Washington, but he's going to play against some better defenses. But if he's doing this stuff at a base level and he's able to carry that work over week to week, then you're going to get much better play out the quarterback position, and you're going to have a much better chance to win. Make no mistake about it. Cleveland Browns are playing bad football right now. If it weren't for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm not sure this team would have a win. And if it weren't for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think we would be entertaining the conversation of Browns potentially being one of the worst teams in football. But teams have had bad starts and have had strong finishes before. It's possible for the Cleveland Browns, but a lot of stuff's got to change. They got to play a lot better football down the stretch. All right. We are at the last stretch of the show. You guys know what I like to do at the final stretch of this show. Let's take some questions here from the chat. See, Gregory H here says, I noticed that Deontay Foreman in the backfield to return kicks. Do you see that being commonplace now? Like he may be getting used on special teams as a running back with Hines coming back. I believe Deontay Foreman has been in the backfield to return kicks since the start of the season. And I think that's the plan for the Browns. They want to use running backs to return kicks. I wouldn't be surprised if once Chubb comes back and Chubb goes full time, that it's Foreman and Ford, because I honestly do think Jerome Ford would be excellent for those kickoffs. The way he can get downfield and just like hit a high miles per hour number. And with that speed, that breakaway speed he has, I think he'd be great on kickoff return. So I think that's plan A. Deontay Foreman, and Jerome Ford return those kicks. But I think right now it's a backup running back in Deontay Foreman instead of it being Jerome Ford. I think it'd be Jerome Ford, Deontay Foreman going forward, though, once Nick Chubb gets back. Great question. Let's get another one up here. Greg says, do you see us taking an offensive tackle as a priority next season, maybe even over a quarterback or a wide receiver? I don't think the Browns are going to lock themselves into a position, right? If they get to whatever they get to in the draft and the best player on the board is a wide receiver, they'll take a wide receiver. If the best player on their board is a quarterback, they'll take a quarterback. And if the best player on their board is a tackle, they'll take a tackle. And potentially if the best player on their board by far is an edge, they'll take an edge. The Browns have pretty consistently been a best player available type team. And we really don't know what this offensive tackle class is looking like. Again, I'm surprised they did not take a tackle in this year's draft. I really thought they would. But if they feel like the pick is right for whatever position, they'll take whatever position they want. I don't think the Browns like locking themselves into having the draft for need. I think they use free agency for need. And we'll see how free agency rolls for them, given the questionable cap situations they're going to be in. Let's get another question in there. Do you think Watson getting on DeJuan, then going back to him to pick him up afterwards? What do I think of that? I think Watson was very frustrated. Watson was very frustrated. And I think he made a mistake by taking it out on DeJuan at that exact moment, right? And I think Watson realized that wasn't the way to get the point across. And I think he made the mature decision to go apologize to DeJuan and more calmly communicate his point to DeJuan. And I think him not just leaving it at the blow up on DeJuan Jones is the good thing, right? Him blowing up on the offensive lineman on the field, not good. You don't want that to happen, right? You don't see that happening a ton. I know people say Tom Brady does it, but Tom Brady has unimaginable clout that Deshaun Watson doesn't have. You can't do that unless you're like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and even Peyton Manning used to get in fights with his O-lineman all the time about that sort of thing. So Deshaun got to do a better job of making sure that doesn't come out on the field, because now it becomes something for everybody to talk about, and you kind of throw your young player under the bus when you do that. Right? Like, we don't need to be aware of this situation for it to be fixed. But I think him going to the sideline, making up for it, and calmly communicating that point back to DeJuan, that made a difference, right? And thank goodness they caught that on camera, and it didn't just get left that Deshaun just straight up chewed this dude out. Because some of y'all might look at it as, no, he's lighting a fire under these guys. But some people on that team might look at it as you throwing DeJuan under the bus. And that's going to lead to all kind of infighting in the locker room. So you can't do that kind of thing that publicly. But I thought that him going to DeJuan afterwards was a good move. We got another question here. Fumble 13 says 2 more losses. Should we trade Smith, Cooper, and Harris? Why? What are you going to get for them? Serious question. Like, for the trade everybody, people, what are you going to get? Like, because if we're going to get like a 5th and 2 6 back, it ain't worth it. We ain't even going to use them picks. I'd rather just play the season out. Like, that's it. I'd rather just let him play the whole season out. I don't see the need. I don't see the reason to trade all these players just because you're having a losing season, or at least you're having a bad start to the season. You might as well play it out because you ain't gonna get nothing for Zadarius Smith or Amari Cooper right now, or what? Shelby Harris. You're not about to get nothing for him. Ain't gonna be worth it. But you're gonna get a 6th-round pick that you're gonna put on the practice squad. Ain't worth it. Unless somebody offers you something crazy, it makes no sense to do that. You might as well play it out. We got another one? Do you think we're seeing the effects of so many coaching changes? O-line, offensive coordinator, combined with a lack of preseason reps, have caused this massive regression? It's too late in the season to blame the preseason for anything. The Browns have played 4 games. The preseason is 3 games. You played a preseason worth of regular season games at this point. It is too late to get away with that excuse. Maybe the first week of the season, I can let the preseason be an excuse, right? But once we get into week 2, week 3, man, like even if you've played more in those 3 weeks than you would ever play in the preseason. Like you play more in the first game than you would ever play in the preseason. You just combine the game time because you usually play like a quarter each in every preseason game, 2 quarters. You play like 4 quarters, you double the amount of reps that you would get in the preseason in the first week. So now I don't buy preseason as an excuse outside of week 1, to be honest with you. It's week 4, preseason or not, whether you played your starters or not, it feels like these problems would still exist. They're a little bit deeper than that. But take one more question and then we'll head out. I missed the first half of the stream. If you addressed this already, sorry. But what are your thoughts on the consistent difference in execution between scripted drives and subsequent under Kevin Stefanski? I mean, they scored on that first drive, but I think the Browns had success on a lot of quote unquote unscripted drives. And I don't even think that first drive was completely scripted because they got to some 3rd down situations that I don't think they anticipated. So no, I don't think this is a scripted drive versus anything. I thought Kevin actually called a pretty damn good game when you look at the play call and how they got executed. I mean, Deshaun Watson was cooking for a reason. Kev was in his bag too. I don't think the play calling or the game plan offensively was the problem for the Browns. All that stuff was working. I mean, Deshaun doesn't go 22 or 32 on a bad game plan, right? Like we all can admit that Deshaun had 3 touchdowns on the table that got taken off. Well, that doesn't happen on a bad game plan. Like Deshaun played great, and I think offensively the game plan was really good for this team. The issues aren't with the game plan this week. The issue is that Amari Cooper dribbled a ball off his chest and it turned into an interception. The issue is that Nick Harris held and turned a touchdown into a 10-yard penalty. The issue is that Nick Harris snapped the ball early after the Browns got to the 10-yard line. Like this is one week where we can't complain about the execution of the Browns offense at the quarterback or at the coach. They did their jobs this week. It was the execution of it from the wide receivers that failed them, and only the wide receivers. I thought the tight ends were good. And honestly, we're talking about Amari Cooper and Nick Harris. Maybe a little DeJuan Jones sprinkled in there, but DeJuan had a fine second half. That's really what we're talking about. I want to thank you guys for joining us. I want to thank the OBR for having me. Thank Ian behind the scenes for putting together a strong show here. Everybody give a hand to Ian. But y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Catch me again next Monday, 7 p.m. live. I'm always here. Peace.
Thank you, Quincy. Always great to hear Quincy hang out for his whole show. Welcome, Fred. It's Wednesday. Fred and I are here to talk Cleveland Browns football after another losing effort against the Las Vegas Raiders. How you doing, Fred?
Oh, I'm doing okay. Better than the Browns.
Yeah, you sound you sound alive, which is better than the Browns are in at 1-3 after that debacle against the Las Vegas whatever Raiders. and the Browns sort of refusing to get out of their own way all day on Sunday afternoon. I tell you what, before we get into it, let's do the usual disclaimer. This show is powered by your comments and questions. Quincy takes comments for like the last 10 minutes of his show. We are really driven by your comments and questions for the entire program. So please hit us up with your comments and questions. I'm going to zero out all the ones you were asking Quincy. So let's start off fresh with your comments and questions. That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to react to throughout the program. And so I'm going to go off and go unstar those questions and start off anew. And we will be happy to answer anything that you want to throw in our direction. And I know that you have a lot to get off your chest after this loss against the very mediocre Las Vegas, Oakland, whatever Raiders. So while we pile up some questions here, let us talk about some of the news of the day. And let's start off with some good news, Fred. And that's the return of Batman. There's at least some good news on the injury front that you reported from the Zoom call this afternoon, that Nick Chubb is coming off the PUP list, starts practicing on Wednesday. That gives him a 21-day window to return, which I'm assuming we'll see him come off which means we'll see him come off the PUP list in probably 20.99999 days, right, Fred?
Yeah, well, he has to, or he spends the rest of the year on injury reserve. So that would be, he has to be activated before the Ravens game. Well, actually, Bengals would be the third. So if my math's right, I expect that would be the home game against the Bengals. Why wouldn't you infuse him into the lineup in front of the home crowd in a big division game? I don't expect him to come right out and get 20 carries. I would think they would work him in. So he definitely is not going to play this week, but maybe they'd sprinkle him in with the Eagles for a few plays next week. But then again, I would think that the target all along would have been that Bengals Ravens back-to-back home games, the 3 home games. But they're kind of putting themselves, behind the 8 ball at 1-3. You cannot lose these 2 games and be 1-5 by the time you get to the Bengals coming in. You have already, built yourself a deep hole. So let me say this. I don't think Nick Chubb's the savior to this team. There's a lot going wrong. I mean, if the line doesn't block, he's not going to be able to get much more yardage than what they're getting. But what I'm expecting is a lift and getting some guys back that can conceivably block a little better than what we've seen the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so I think it would give them a big lift. I thought all along it would give the Browns a big lift going into the second half of the season. The point was it was assumed that they would stay relevant. Where they're at now, like I said, you keep going down this road and your relevancy will be in question for sure. This was supposedly the easy part of the schedule. You looked at Jacksonville thinking they were the good team after the Cowboys, but then you had, the Giants at home and the Raiders on the road and the Commanders kind of rebuilding. Now the Commanders, they got a legitimate quarterback as a rookie. Mm-hmm. And so nothing really is a given. The Eagles, which looked like the toughest of all, they haven't been that awesome. I mean, they got beat by Tampa Bay the other day. And so the one thing that I'll say is this is the NFL. That's why I don't gamble, especially on the NFL, because
Right.
it is like throwing money away for the most part. Because as soon as you assume the Browns are done, then they come back and rattle off some wins. Just like if they won the other end, then you would think, oh, they're going to steamroll, and then they lose to teams they shouldn't. Now they've done
Sure.
that 2 weeks in a row. So I don't know what to say. It's one of the things I don't like about the NFL. I'm more of a fan with the Buckeyes because I don't have a vested interest in it. I
Mhm.
like that it's pretty much, they're going to win. Is it going to be 40-3 or 50-3?
Right.
There's no intrigue in college football for the most part until you get even teams. I mean, NFL, that's the any given Sunday, and why Roger Goodell and the NFL like it. They want everybody to be 9-8 or 8-9. And so
Right.
the good thing about that can keep the Browns in contention, but they're going to have to start playing better than this. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
1-3 and losing the way they're losing. But I heard Dan there at Quincy is, they played well. Everybody's on Deshaun Watson. He completed 75% of his passes, and it should have been 80%.
Hmm.
I know of a couple, at least, drops. They're leading the league in drop passes, so he's not getting any help. When he was clean, I read he was the highest rated quarterback. When he was under duress, he had trouble. He shouldn't have any interceptions. I mean, when you hit the number 2 on Cooper's chest
Right.
downfield, you threw it in the right spot. And, and that calling that holding, that, that
Brutal.
was a killer,
Yeah.
So it's
That's like
just,
150 yards right there taking off, his
well, it's like,
stat
it's
line,
like I
those two
said
plays.
last year in that Titans game, they took away a 40-yard touchdown on an
Right.
inadvertent whistle. I mean, I think Watson can be at least an average to above average quarterback, regardless of what the statistics say.
Mm.
I thought he played but you got to keep him upright. And I fault the front office for not, I think like all of us, they assumed Conklin and Wills would be ready to go to start the season. Let alone 5 games in, and you still don't know where they're at. And they didn't really go out and get any frontline help on the offensive line other than drafting Zach Zinner, who's a guard.
Right. Right. CTG Cement wants to get your sense of how the Browns are going to balance the need to ease Chubb back slowly, given the severity of his injury, versus that urgency that they've got to feel to get him back, into that lineup here. You think they're going to play it safe with him, given the severity of that injury?
Well, I'll ask you, what do you think? I mean,
They
Jack
always
Conklin
do.
and Jed Wills, they have babied them, I almost feel like. I mean, my
Mm,
goodness, the one was out over a year and he was ready to go. And like I said, a tackle pulled a hamstring. You don't have to run full speed. I played baseball with a pulled hamstring and I couldn't run full speed, but I could run half speed when you're in the trenches, you would think you'd be able to be okay. But even before the hamstring, I don't know why he wasn't playing. And then Wills, that one really is a head scratcher. But no, Chubb, I think he could be playing by now. To be honest, from what I
mm,
saw back at Greenbrier, I saw him running full speed on a straight line. Now I know it was a straight line, but he looked as fast as I've ever seen him run. That was in July after practice. He did started then doing zigzagging. We saw him run, and I've seen him probably a month ago pulling weights on a sled and doing. I have to think he's chomping at the bit and he's ready to go. But coming off
right.
that injury, why wouldn't you take your time with him? I mean, what when he comes back, I expect him to get eased in, a couple carries, maybe in first half, second half, that type of a thing. I don't even know if they'll even how long until they even give him a full load or he would take over as the lead back. I mean,
Right.
I think it would be Ford, Chubb, and at some point flip it around. But no, they're going to be very careful with him. That's why it makes sense to me. 2 weeks of practice, and then enter in the Bengals game. I mean,
Right.
I would think a running back would be even a little bit more careful with than a offensive lineman, and they've been extremely careful with them. Of course, I'm speaking without knowing what's going on, but
Yeah.
I mean, just the experts. We've had experts that write for our site, and the type of injury that Wills had. I mean, I have to think the Browns thought he'd be back by mini camp, let alone training camp, let alone
Sure.
5 games into the season. So, I mean, I really don't don't want to speculate, but it's just so hard. But with Chubb, I think, yeah, I mean, he's not going to be the savior. I mean, he's going to be a major threat. I think out of the backfield, getting him the ball, on a quick pass and so forth. We've really never seen him run out of the shotgun that much that I know of. So, I mean, it's going to be adjustment around, but I think it more than anything it'll be a big emotional lift for the Browns. As much as it was an emotional downer when he was carried off that field in the Steelers and they lost, I would think if you could, not lose the next 2 games, you start the division with the Bengals. That would give you a major lift for the home crowd and everything, for him to come out of the tunnel. I mean, it would be unreal down there. It was unreal at the Jets game when he just was Batman breaking the guitar. So, but they got to get it together on the field and start winning games.
Yeah, absolutely they do. And, Nick Chubb comes out there, universally beloved in Cleveland. Fans will go wild, but they still got to get out there and play some halfway decent football. Second item, a couple players day to day. Maybe I'm a little bit cynical. I'm interpreting that as meaning that they'll be back by week 12. Jordan Hicks and Ethan Posick, both considered day to day. I'm assuming no information beyond that. We have no idea if they're going to play. But you sounded on the radio hit, which I posted to our podcast, you sounded a little bit confident the offensive tackles could potentially return against the Commanders. Any justification for that, or you just feel like we're due? Fred, your mic is not connected. It's showing that you're muted for some reason, and I cannot unmute you.
Any better now?
Much better now.
I mean, Kevin Stefanski said today that no update. We'll see Wednesday. Neither practiced last week, which I was surprised because, again, we got the idea. All he said with Conklin was a minor setback 2 weeks ago when he didn't play. So, I mean, it's all speculation. They don't tell us anything. We don't see anything. They don't come out on the field and do anything when we're there. So you're just going by day to day, day to day. They're working hard. We'll see them when we see them. I'm kind of tired of writing about it,
I get it. I get it.
But I know that's what we got to do. I think Nyheim Hines will be out there, kind of like he's a little under the radar. They signed him to be their kick and punt returner and to be their third down back out of the backfield. If you could get Chubb and him back, I think that would go a long way in maybe putting a jolt into your running game. But it predicated getting – I think Conklin would be the biggest impact guy, especially in the running game. Wills, we've seen him. By all indications, he felt he played really well until he got hurt in that game. I only saw a play or two that was picked out in film studies that showed him not blocking, but they got to be better than James Hudson. I mean, I see him on videos, guys just running by him, and I don't even what he's doing. And I know DeJuan Jones has struggled a little. He cost him a big play yesterday where he didn't pick up the blitz, and so Watson got drilled when he would have, if he'd have had a step, he could have, probably had a touchdown or a deep throw to Cooper if he'd have caught it. So yeah, there's so many variables. You don't know if it's Bill Callahan, Andy Dickerson, not having them all healthy. But I think the one thing, the front office, you have to think they were assuming Conklin and Wills were going to be ready from the get-go, because I don't know how you would go into the season. We're going into game 5. Neither of them were put on injury reserve. You could have put them on injury reserve if they weren't going to play, but we know Wills then played in the 3rd game and got hurt, and Conklin was going to play and he got hurt. So you still needed a better option. So, I think Njoku's got a chance to play. I saw him practice last week. He looked fine to me. I've seen him for 2 weeks walking around in the locker room. He's got to be a better threat than what they have. Nothing against Blake Whiteheart, who got a touchdown, but why not get him out there before your season's completely down the toilet? You lose this week, 1-4 already. Your chances are down around the 14% position. Your best chance is to get back in it in the division, and you got those division games coming up. So, So injuries, who knows?
Yeah, I'm hoping that getting Njoku back will help them with the run game as well. He can do a little bit better in the blocking department and a little bit better in pass protection as well. And of course,
he might be your number one option in the passing game. I mean, you can't count on Cooper here lately, and Njoku looked really, I thought, was in line for a big season in what I saw in training camp and in that scrimmage with the Vikings. Watson probably threw to him 5, 6, 7 times in that scrimmage against the number 1 Viking defense, and they had a good connection. And then, of course, he gets hurt right off the bat.
Right. Now, in terms of Hudson and his struggles and so on and so forth, I really feel that this season the team made 2 assumptions. The front office made 2 assumptions that have proven incorrect. And one of those assumptions was that they could run it back one more year with an offensive line that was getting old and was injured, right? With Bitonio and Teller getting older, with guys who are coming back from injury, and that has just fallen apart on them. Their injured guys obviously haven't come back the way that they expected to. Bitonio's production has fallen off. I know we hate to say it because he's been such a great contributor. Teller's done all right. The center hasn't been great guns. DeJuan Jones and Hudson are young and learning and being throttled by defensive linemen throwing sophisticated techniques at them. It just hasn't worked on the offensive line, and I think it was a bad assumption by the front office that things would hold together one more year for them. Do you think that was a major faux pas, major error by the front office, or do you think it's all going to come together when these guys come back?
Oh, I think it was, but you were destitute of draft picks, and you used your one of your third round picks on a guard in Zach Zinner. Maybe there was not a tackle available, but you felt like the veteran, they signed 2 journeymen NFL experienced journeyman veterans, kind of, I think, to be their fifth, sixth option if they had the injuries. And that was Hakeem Adeniji. He is on injury reserve. I don't know if he's a guy that they may, I think he's still on injury reserve unless they quietly waived him. And Jermaine Afidi. They were, in all seriousness, battling James Hudson to be the fourth tackle. And if you remember that one preseason game, 4, 5, and 6 got hurt. Hudson, Afidi, and Adeniji all got hurt in that game, and one's on injury reserve still. And so, yeah, I mean, you're not going to go out and, if you're counting on Conklin with the money you paid him and Wells the money you paid him in a contract year, you would think those guys would be on the field ready to go. And Batonio, Teller, Pro Bowl caliber, and you decided Ethan Posick was better than Nick Harris back when you trade, or you originally moved on from Harris or gave the contract to Posick. So I don't know if it was a miscalculation, but it's just been the injuries. They haven't been able to stay on the field together. I mean, there's just no simple way to put it with the variables. I think that they're hoping to get them all back intact, at least, by the time division play begins, and if not before, and try to get some semblance of a rhythm, But I do believe that, I know you have limited resources to some degree, but I have to think that they were counting big time on Conklin and Wills to be ready, at least one of them, to start the season.
Right.
I thought they'd be back in the June mini camp. I can understand not doing the OTAs, but then they didn't do that. And then, okay, started training. Then they put them on pups. You're like, oh, okay, any day. And then they never activated them until, the regular season. And at this point, you might as well have not done it.
Right.
Slow healers.
Yeah. And I read the water cooler. I was reading the comments in chat while Quincy was talking, and I get all the frustration on the part of the fans. But, the notion that there's a simple solution to all this, I think it evades me, right? Last week, everybody was talking about, let's replace Watson, and start there. But the blocking and the tackling, it's as fundamental as that. What I saw last week, the blocking and the tackling just wasn't there, on the offensive and defensive side of things, and the fundamentals just aren't there. But
let me just say that, I think most of the people watching here have noticed when Stefanski and the coaching staff scripts the first series, why did they go 15 plays, 70, 80 yards for a touchdown almost every time? And then it kind of falls off from there. Are they being adjusted and they're not counter adjusting? Because it just seems like they have a plan that works on offense, and then they become point challenged the rest of the game. I mean, it's unheard of to me that this offense has not scored 20 points yet. The most they scored was 17, and that was against the Cowboys. Now, in the scoreboard, they had 18 against the Jaguars, but there was a 2-point safety in there. So they've really scored 17, 16 twice, and 15 once, and not against the 1985 Chicago Bears. This is concerning. And yesterday, I thought Watson played well, but the mistakes took a touchdown off. That was 7 points. They could have for sure kicked a field goal there at the end if Hopkins wouldn't have missed the PAT. So they would have scored, 24 points or so, or 27 points, which is enough to win a game without just 2 mistakes. And that's not counting the drop pass by Cooper, which he was in the red zone or near the red zone on that play if he catches it. So, I think those mistakes just took off more points than they put up. And that's the concerning point. The defense isn't playing like they were. I think they were a little overrated last year. They were considered the number one defense because the rankings goes by the number of yards you give up. They gave up fewer yards, but they still gave up 21 points a game is what I go by, and that was about middle of the pack. Well, they're giving up about 22 a game now, which should be, around 20 should give you enough to win, but the offense, is not doing it. And you were expecting them to be able to shut the Giants completely down, a struggling team. The Raiders, a team averaging 51 yards rushing, rushes for 152 yards with a couple running backs that I really don't even know who they are, and without Devontae Adams. You would have thought they would have smothered them with Garner Minshew, and they didn't. Any way you look at it, they gave up a 10-point lead. The Browns got a 10-0 lead, and the defense gave up 20 unanswered points. They did do a little redeeming and got a minute with the scoop and score fumble, but they had a chance to just shut them down from the get-go. I mean, I don't think anybody would look at the Raiders and say, that's a good offense. I mean, even with Devontae Adams. But they were able to cause the defense enough problems to get a win.
All right. Well, I was just thinking, I thought about the same thing, the fact that they haven't hit 20 points, and I just, facing that Ratbird and that Steeler defense, I'm not looking forward to it. But good news, World's Fastest Fat Man has not flipped a table or thrown a chair tonight yet. But World's Fastest Fat Man, if you decide that you want to do that and you want to do it with force, you're going to want to talk to our friends at Core Home Fitness, because they will help you get strength in those arms and, particularly those biceps with their adjustable dumbbells, so that if you hurl that chair, flip that table, you can do it with strength. That's what these guys do, Core Home Fitness. You can check out their assortment of lifting equipment, especially their adjustable dumbbells, which are the top of the market. Bring the gym home. They've got all the equipment that you need, the benches, the holders for the adjustable dumbbells. They've got products like the Glute Drive Plus and the Fight Master. They've got a US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. They know what they're doing. CoreHomeFitness.com is the place to go. Check out their equipment. It's the very best, according to Men's Health, New York Times, Best Buy by Consumer Reports, you name it. And best of all, they have stepped up to support the OBR and help bring you this programming for free every night of the week here at the OBR. So thank you to Core Home Fitness, CoreHomeFitness.com. If you're going to flip a table, do it well with Core Home Fitness. All right, let's get into some of these questions we have here, Fred. We have got a bunch here to go through. One question from Elliot very early on in the program asked if Steph has power to bench Watson. So if Kevin Stefanski decides in the middle of the game that Deshaun Watson is not his guy, which he would not have last weekend, do you think he has the power to switch to Winston, or is that like a consensus decision among him and Barry and DePodesta and that whole crowd?
He absolutely has the decision. It's in his fifth year. A lot of people, that aren't around the team think that Jimmy Haslam's sitting up in the press box, making calls. I mean, back in the day, I was in the Art Modell suite with Art Modell, and and I always heard that he's calling down there. I was the guy who had to call down to see what was going on. I never, that's another story, but that didn't happen. No, Stefanski makes the decisions, but I will say this, he's very slow to make decision changes. Do you remember Baker Mayfield needed surgery on his shoulder? And he
Hmm.
had Case Keenum, who they were paying $7 million as an
I
insurance
remember.
policy.
Yeah.
Every week, he kept going with Mayfield, even when the fans said, why? He's struggling. He goes, he obviously felt he was the best option to win the games. He'd say that, but why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you make the change? You know,
Hmm.
we know
Yeah.
there's no love lost between Mayfield, and Stefanski by the time things ended here. So, it's it's totally his decision. But everybody, I know the general dislike for Watson, but I thought he played well yesterday. I thought he
He
was
did.
the bright spot on the offense, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
Amari Cooper catches that ball and they score. Say they only get a field goal there and you have that Harris penalty. I mean, they win that game going away. And even Hopkins doesn't miss the extra point. You're at least going to overtime. He moved him down the field to put him in position to score. Yeah, the last play was a disaster, but I blame Nick Harris on that. He snapped it into
Right.
Watson's chest, which wasted a play, and they lost 6 yards. So it was just like a penalty. So it's like 2nd and 16, and you have
Hmm.
to get a touchdown. So, I would be happy if Watson played how he did yesterday the rest of the season. They're going to win games. You got to get the rest of them going. Is Elijah Moore playing? Hello. Is Cedric Tillman playing? Hello. Those guys aren't doing anything. I mean, you're getting Jerry Jeudy is playing pretty well, and Amari Cooper, 3 out of 4 games, has not played well, and you have an Ed Njoku, plus an offensive line that's letting your quarterback just get pounded. So
Mm.
Watson could be pulled, yes, but I don't think that's the problem.
Right. Right. Um, all right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Gregory H just wants to know a little bit more about Njoku. We'll find out more on Wednesday, right? He practices on Wednesday, and then Stefanski will say nothing about the quality of that practice on Thursday.
I have clips of him last week. I think it was on Thursday, and he was doing individual drills and he was running with the team. And you don't know. Obviously, he wasn't running full speed, but you could see him moving and agility.
Hmm.
Um, they didn't have him practice Friday outside. I think he'd be back Wednesday practicing. I mean, if you were good enough to, again, you don't know. I didn't hear after he practiced Thursday. Did he have pain or something, or did they just say, okay, one day you're not going to play this week, next week, is the target? Again, the injury reserve is 4 games. You didn't put him on injury reserve. If you weren't going to play him this week, you might as well put him on injury reserve, because then next week, he would have been back anyway. So it's hard to say. I think guys should be ready to go. I know he's fighting to play. I thought he was fighting to play last week. So I just think this training staff, it's a good thing, is the most overcautious staff, one of them in the league. All you have to do is look on their injury report. Every week, they got 15 to 18 guys listed, and the other teams, it seems like, have 3 or 4, and it's
Right.
like, I just feel like everything that gets reported becomes an injury. And I'm sure the training staff, is probably, they've kind of put out the word, make sure you report everything. I don't know, but it sure just seems overly cautious. You got a guy like Myles Garrett who's got 3 injuries listed, and he says he's going to play. And the coach last week, when asked about him, he said, well, he said he's going to play through it. So, what comes in where the medical people say, well, no, he's going to play, or he can play. He gets 2 sacks, so I don't know, but they they need to get some spark going, because it's early. It's getting early late, or late early,
Yeah,
what Yogi
that
Berra
it
said.
is.
One of those isms that of only 4 games, but you're at the quarter mark, and you don't want to get yourself eliminated before the bye week for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah, I mean, this team with 47 people on the injured reserve list and a giant cone of silence over each of those injuries certainly makes your job quite a challenge, Fred, and I certainly appreciate that. Question from Gregory H. Do you guys believe all this hype that Amari is just not focused? So I had that as a question. What is going on with Amari Cooper? I don't think any of us can really know. But I guess my question is, Fred, we lose these next 2 games. What do you think the odds are that Amari's still with the Browns when the season finishes? If we go 1-5. Do you think Andrew Berry tries to get something for him, trade value?
If they feel the season's over, but I don't think they would feel the season's over unless they're like 2-7 or one and
Mm-hmm.
eight or 3-6 or something like that. I don't know what the line of demarcation is, but what are you going to get for him? You're going to get a 7th round pick and send him to the Chiefs, who you
And the
know,
last pick in the draft.
yeah, and forget that. You play the Chiefs later, and you're just going to send an AFC team to the Super Bowl. I mean, I don't think anybody likes playing or seeing a player that was with them be a
Right.
key contributor. You saw it in the 3rd game. He had 2 touchdowns. He made it looked like the same old Amari Cooper. I mean, there's 2 plays that stand out yesterday. Obviously, the drop ball. I don't know. I mean, he wasn't available to talk after the game, which is unlike him. But it hit him, right in the chest, which I don't. I think he's got more drops than anybody in the NFL right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had, but one that was under the radar, he had an illegal motion that took back a 10-yard first down on a play that he wasn't even he was in motion and he turned up field early, which he wasn't even in it. So those 2 mistakes just seem uncustomary of him. I mean, I wouldn't rule anything out, but it just seemed like Andrew Berry, I wouldn't think that you would do that. He's still your number 1 receiver. What do you get? You trade him. You got Elijah Moore in the last year of his deal. I think right now he's gone because he's not showing anything.
No.
He had 1
No.
catch for 11 yards. Okay, it might have been a pretty good catch, but I was expecting much more. I was expecting Moore to be more like Jerry Jeudy, have
Mm-hmm.
2 of those guys. And I was expecting Cedric Tillman to have an impact. There's something holding him back because David Bell got cut and he ended up being the 4th receiver until he got hurt. So now Tillman's kind of by default there, but they even had James Prochet in the other day, like instead of Tillman. So I don't think you have too many great options if you move on from Cooper,
Yeah.
especially now. I mean,
Tillman and Moore have just been invisible this year. Just invisible. And I can't explain it because we expected so much from those guys coming out of Greenbrier and training camp. Okay, let's go to another question about Chubb from CTG Cement. He says another question about Chubb's return. Do you think the Browns will have a counter for teams that stack the box and sit on all the short stuff, or will they continue to struggle throwing it deep? Good question here because Watson had been throwing so much short stuff, but it looked like they were able to open it up a little bit last week against the Raiders, but that was with Max Crosby gone.
yeah, I mean, until they really have a legitimate running game, I mean, they had, something like 92 yards, but 35 came on that one play, not discounting it, on the last drive by Jerome Ford. And Watson rushed for 32. So that was, 68 of your 92. Other than that, you had 24 yards. So teams don't have to respect it and they can just play for those short passes. They're also need to, they're going to have to connect on some of them deep balls. There was that ball that they blitzed and DeJuan Jones whiffed at the blitzer and Watson was hit as he threw to Cooper. If he'd had just been able to look, I think they would have been able to connect on that. And, obviously that 82-yard one got called back. So until you can loosen up the secondary by hitting on some deep ones, they're going to keep doing that. But Chubb will definitely help. The big question is you don't know if you're getting 5.3 yards a carry, Chubb, which is his career average, or some lesser version. You can't expect him to come right in and be the same Nick Chubb, but I'd say 80% Nick Chubb is probably better than what they have on the field now.
Right. Chat username wants to change the topic a little bit to off the field issues with Deshaun Watson. Wants to know the status of the NFL hearing on Deshaun. Thought that was supposed to happen this week. That was the rumor, but that appears to have vanished from radar. I have not heard much about it. Have you heard anything about that recently, Fred? About Busby taking his?
I haven't heard anything about it. Haven't read anything about it.
Happy to not hear anything about it, actually.
Well, to be honest, only in Cleveland, you just feel like Watson is going to have a breakout game or get going, and it looks like everything's turned around, and then the news over, and he'll get suspended for the rest of the year or something like that.
Yeah, that would be very Brownsian for something like that to happen.
I don't know. I don't know if
akin to that.
I don't know if they're trying to get something settled what, but yeah, the last you heard was in 2 weeks the NFL was going to meet with the witness, but they're not going to disclose that. Nobody's going to leak that out unless it's the lawyer for the woman,
Yeah. Trying to put pressure on Watson to settle, I'm sure, but that's
what's going on with same thing
football.
with Mike Hall. Mike Hall, it looked like his case kind of got settled, but the NFL's still doing their silent investigation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those things drag on. I think I just read that McManus, the kicker, just was cleared by the NFL. I don't know if that means he's cleared. I'm sure that he's not suspended. So, but I don't know how long that means that, he missed 4 games at least because of their investigation. So,
yeah. Well, Gregory H. wants to talk about this as well. He says, I know this sounds off the wall, but do you believe the NFL might have a bit of an issue with the fact that Watson's playing in Cleveland, considering they wanted a full year suspension? If they wanted a full year suspension, at some point the NFL would figure out a way to make that happen, but Judge Sue Robinson gave the order that she did. He was suspended most of the year. He was fined very heavily. And as far as I know, it's over. That part of it's over. This new thing that's coming up is, they've got the same judge on it again. She has been very rough with Watson in the past, and I assume if this is new and if the evidence is strong, would be rough once again. But again, this is just pure speculation.
back on remembering the Watson deal, the NFL had some independent judge who they had hired for that case, ruled 6 games, and then they had a appeal, which was to Roger Goodell or something, and it ended up at 11 games because they didn't want to go with what was recommended to them. So, yeah, I mean, to your point, it could have just said, okay, even though 6 games will do the whole season. So I think that's why it ended up at 11. But you're right. If they feel like they can do it, they do it. I would have thought that all this would have been lumped in because it's, to me, what's more concerning would be more concerning if this happened, currently. This is still in that same Houston Texans era when the
Right.
Texans have got off scot-free for all this that went on with them. And they had to have known all this stuff. And the
Right.
Browns are getting all the blame on this when they were the team that traded for him, but so were several other teams, in that mix. But the Browns kind of got left holding the bag, and that's kind of where it is. So, yeah, I just assume it. Get the season over. Let's see what Watson does for a full season, and then sort it out in the off season. If he gets suspended, then they can move on and all that kind of stuff. But anything less during the season just makes the season, go right down the tubes quickly.
Right. And a little bit more on off-field skullduggery. World's fastest fat man says, I think the NFL wants Jimmy to build a big dome more than they want to punish Watson. Now, I don't know what the NFL wants in terms of Watson. I mean, there's been some things reported in Rumor Central, Insider Central. If you're a subscriber, you've read those certainly. But the one thing I can tell you is that the NFL would love Jimmy Haslam to build a big, expensive, luxurious, gorgeous dome for the Cleveland Browns. Because if he does that, it helps other teams build, these mega palaces for their football teams and drive more and more revenue. They would absolutely love that and will do whatever they can to help make that happen. That is certainly
That's
true.
a good point. I think world's fastest hit it there is that, yeah, I have heard that too. In the big picture, if it came down to, helping Haslam he's in the middle of the dome push, and you get a big Watson suspension and again torpedoed everything, that's going to hurt the Cleveland area in their support of building this dome. And so, yeah, I could see that. I don't know if the scales of justice when it comes to the NFL, how they'll weigh in if it benefits them more the other.
The side with the money goes way, way, way down. I think is how that works. But again,
Exactly.
we're just speculating. We don't have secret communications from Roger Goodell to let us know. So let's finish up with a little football. This from Gregory H. Speaking of Miles' injuries, he was obviously a bit labored. So do you see another pitch count on him this week? Do you think the Browns are going to continue to take it very careful with Miles? Boy, it's tough seeing him out of on the sidelines ever with this team, given the magnitude of his impact, Fred.
Well, I think a lot will be his input. I was surprised last week he returned to practice on Thursday. I was assuming he wouldn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, and they just basically do a light walkthrough on Friday and rest. He said, managing, at this point, he doesn't really need all the day-to-day reps, but he returned to practice Thursday. So I don't know what they'll do this week. I don't expect to see him Wednesday, but I think a lot of it, he's earned the right to monitor his workload. But when he's out there, he's very efficient. I mean, they had 2 sacks. He had them both. Okay, so like I said with Chubb, if Miles is at 70 or 80%, he's probably still the best player on the defense. So um, he said that his injuries couldn't be hurt worse. So I don't see him holding back. If they said, if you keep playing, you're going to, you know, rip your thigh or break your foot or whatever those injuries are, he wouldn't be playing. And so until he hears otherwise, he's going to keep doing it. And Yeah, they do need him, and he said he's looking for the bye week for a break. So I like that mentality. If you had that mentality by some of the other players, maybe you wouldn't have so many guys on the injured list. But who am I to say anything? But I do think that they'll monitor a little. You've getting some play out of Isaiah McGuire. That was a nice strip, and he had a nice tackle. And unfortunately, Alex Wright had the roughing the passer that killed him again. But Smith, Okoronkwo, you got a little more depth, so you can rotate him. But I think he'll be fine. I think he plans on playing, and he said last week a animal's the fiercest when it's injured, and so he's
Right.
taking that mentality, and I think he's playing well. But teams are going to take advantage of it. You saw the Raiders when he went out; they went
Yep.
into a no huddle, so he couldn't get back on the field unless you called a timeout.
Right. That
So,
was very smart and yeah, very noticeable that they did everything they could to keep Miles off the field. We got 3 questions left. Let's zip through those before we abscond here. World's fastest fat man asked Fred, "This team feels very different than it did last year. How does it feel in the building and talking to players? Do you see any difference, or are we only seeing this on the field?"
well, from Greenbrier, a lot of them are veterans from last year. They're a very confident bunch, and they expected, to be very strong this season. They thought bringing everybody back, they knew the system, especially on defense, second year in a system would even be better. Offense was a little questionable because you're bringing in 6 new offensive coaches and a new system. But, um, even last week after losing the Giants, the locker room wasn't how it was in, years past with the Browns, where that was, solemn and so forth. They were very noisy. They were all yucking it up. They were like, you would have thought they were 4-0 or 3-0 or whatever. They just were loose. And so I don't know what it'll be like this week, but I don't think they're too concerned yet. 1-3 is 1-3, and those of us know statistics. It doesn't bode well. So, but they really have bought into Stefanski's one game at a time, and they just seem to focus on that. As soon as they lose, like the other day, now it's focused on Washington. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, you know, they come out and they can come up with a game plan to get that rookie confused and get him off his rhythm, because so far he's kind of owning everybody he's playing.
Right. Right. Um, James McNeil writes in with regard to the Watson trade, I believe, did not having those picks hurt our team? I mean, we look old and slow, lacking talent all of a sudden. I don't think there was any way to deny that trading away 3 first round picks and more didn't hurt the talent acquisition on this franchise.
Well, yeah, I mean, since Barry's been here, they haven't had many first round picks, but they have. I mean, he had a big hit on second round with JOK, and Newsom's okay. Jedrick Wells can't get on the field, so for a 10th pick. Um, you know, a lot of the third round receivers haven't really made an impact. So most of the players that Andrew Berry has acquired that have helped the roster were in trades or free agency, where you have kind of a lot of money. And those have been good for the most part. But drafting hasn't been that great. Most of the draft picks, were prior to him getting here, like Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb and, Joel Bitonio and guys like that. So, yeah, I mean, there's no question. 3 first-round players you would think would be in your starting lineup, and even second round. So they're gonna have to replenish. It isn't helping their top pick this year is in a legal battle that hasn't been on the field. You talk about infusing some speed into the defensive line. They were
Mm-hmm.
counting on Hall to be a pass rusher up the middle. You're not seeing much of a pass rush from Dalvin Tomlinson or Shelby Harris, so far. So, Hall, I think they're missing him a little bit as far as some speed.
And last question of the night from Gregory H. He says, I do think that owners should pay for the majority of the stadium and the complex. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Well, that's almost a political issue, and we tend to not touch those. But I will admit to being part of team spreadsheet, and part of team spreadsheet says if the public is going to pay, then it's up to the owner or the team to prove that there's going to be a decent return for that money. And in my opinion, the Cleveland Browns have not done that yet. And they should be given ample opportunity to do that, to prove that there is a good return for the state or the city for the money that they spend on it. If it's a good investment, why not? But so far, I haven't seen that from the team. That's my opinion on it. Fred, do you have any thoughts on this delicate matter?
No, it just seems like usually the owners get what they want, and
Yep.
And so I think that's what it'll come down to. I think Haslam, they're gonna do what they want to do. It's their money, and I think that they'll do this regardless. But I think they do want some input financially, from the city or whatever. I do think that they feel that it would bring much more money with a year-round, revenue producing facility than just 8 games a year, or
Right.
a couple concerts, a couple soccer games. So we'll see. I think ultimately they're going to get their way. I don't know any that didn't get their way, that didn't move
Right.
the team.
Right. Exactly. Well, we all lived through that. Well, not all of us. It was now 30 years ago. So I assume that there are some people watching who maybe didn't live through it, but most of us did, and would prefer not to live through it again. All right. Well, that caps off another show. Thank you for hanging out with us and watching. Fred and I will be back again next Monday night at 8 o'clock to discuss the Browns' surprising victory over the Washington Commanders. Who would have imagined a 3-touchdown victory over the Washington Commanders that we get to talk about next Monday night? It'll be wonderful. So
You'd be
please tune
happy
in
with
for
a
that.
1-point win.
We would have been happy with that. That the 3-touchdown victory will just be amazing. That's what we'll be back to talk about next Monday night here on OBR Weekly. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Fred, for all your wisdom. We will see you again next Monday. Until then, good night, folks.
Thanks for tuning